Hello, fellow survivors. Welcome to a little chat about episode 5. There's nothing particular about this video editing wise. We're just going to go for a little walk here on a casual, quiet little morning in the Great Bay Island, following the train tracks. We're going to go this way across the bridge and just follow the train tracks until we're done talking. It's a little loud here with the waterfall, but what are you going to do? We're going to talk about episode 5 and the upcoming release of that, which is happening very soon, most likely. The reason I'm making this video is because I keep getting the same questions again and again on my videos. People are asking, where is episode 5? When is it coming out? Or people are commenting, yeah, it's delayed again, GTA 6 before episode 5, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of comments about episode 5, and there seems to be a belief that it's getting cancelled or even moved or whatever, all sorts of things about it, and I thought I'd just make a quick casual video reiterating some points I made in the past, summarizing some of the points across multiple dev diaries over the last few years. Now, I know a lot of people have waited a long time for episode 5. I mean, the game came out in 2017 and it didn't have all the episodes. It's been out for effectively, if you count early access, it's been out for effectively 11 years. A lot of people criticize the game for not having a complete story mode yet, which is a bit bizarre considering how long the game has been in development. But in order to understand why it's taking so long, there's multiple factors at play here, which we can get into, but it basically has to do with survival mode trumping story mode in some way. First off, though, I just wanted to say that right now I'm recording this in November, and there is no reason to think that the episode 5 isn't coming out very soon. Now, a lot of people think that I have some sort of inside information because I talk to Hinterland sometimes, and I've been involved in playtesting, that sort of stuff. And I also recently started making walkthroughs of Wintermute, but I don't have any inside information. I am going to interview Raf. He has agreed to do that, and he may shed some light on this, but I don't have any inside information. But I have read all the information out there, and I've seen a lot of footage and conference talks of Raf and all sorts of stuff, so I know the gist of this. The only thing I have that I can tell you that's sort of inside, I suppose, is that there was a bug in one of my videos I was making. I was making a run using the time capsule, and it didn't work. And I sent a bug report to Hinterland, and they replied to me saying that they will try and fix it, but they are very busy making episode 5 right now, so they couldn't promise that they could do it. So I do know that they're all working very, very hard to finish episode 5. Now the thing is, we haven't heard anything else, so I don't think there's any reason to think that episode 5 isn't coming out when it's supposed to, which is late 2025. Now we're mid-November now, but you have to remember that if you think about the last releases Hinterland has had in the end of a year, they tend to be in December. They tend to be early December, so people have enough time to play whatever they're adding before Christmas and then also during Christmas. But most importantly, Hinterland is a smaller studio, so what happens is that when they release a content in December, that gives them a few weeks to address immediate issues. If someone has a bug that's really important, or there's something's not working, or something needs improving very quickly, they have a couple of weeks to do that before the Christmas holiday kicks in, and the whole office basically goes on hiatus for a while. And they've done it many times before. So I have no reason to think that episode 5 isn't coming out in December. That's when I think it's coming out. Last time was December 2nd. Before that it was December 5th rather, and so on. So I don't know, but my guess is that episode 5 is coming out, and is coming out within the next few weeks. The fact that they haven't said anything means that they might be getting close, but they don't want to reveal anything until they get there. A counter argument to this is that Hinterland prides himself on being a company that doesn't have crunch, as in they don't push for deadlines. They don't try and work, wear their staff out. So it's done when it's done, sort of thing. So it's possible that they are at the cusp of finishing episode 5, but they haven't actually got there yet, and they're not sure whether to delay it or not. I don't know. It's all speculation at the end of the day. But for me, because we haven't heard anything else, I have no reason to think that the episode isn't coming out, because it was scheduled for late 2025, and late 2025 can mean end of December for all we know. So I still have hope that it is coming out soon. It has been delayed before. At some point, I think it was scheduled to come out in 2022, and then it was 2024, and then it was 2025. At first it was mid, then it was late. And the last update that it was coming out late 2025 hasn't really changed for a long time. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm pretty sure that is the goal. They are hoping to get it out in December, most likely, of 2025, so very, very soon. That would be my guess, and unless we hear otherwise, I think that's what's going to happen. Now, with my luck, of course, I'll release this video, and 2 days later there's a dev diary saying, oh, nobody delayed it. I think that they're probably avoiding delaying it because it's so close to when they said now, so it's not something that they want. But to understand the context of this, let's talk a little bit about the episode itself. We know that the last episode is called Light at the End of All Things. And the thing about episode 5 is that it's a massive undertaking. The episode is much bigger than any of the other episodes. It's so big that it sounds like easily could be 2 episodes, really. It's about 3 or 4 times as big as episode 4. And there's probably at least 3 maps. So it covers a lot of ground, and it's a huge undertaking. Quite a few years ago, Raf actually shared the details of the length of it with his script. He didn't say what it's about, of course, but the script for episode 5 was significantly longer than any other of the episodes. There's a lot to wrap up in episode 5. There's a lot of characters to talk about and wrap up, so there's just so much to cover. And because of that, Raf has also said that the episode is more linear, so you kind of follow different narratives, so it'll probably be less of a fetch questy type of style and more do this and then it transitions and then do this and then it transitions again. Importantly, you are playing as Will and Astrid in episode 5, so you probably will play, for example, as Will, and then you go to the Suzuki Observatory to meet Atwood, who was mentioned as early as episode 2 by Jeremiah. And then you probably play as Astrid in Perseverance Mills, and this whole thing about the cure and whatever that is, and the hard case. And then they probably meet up at the end. Then there's a lot of characters to wrap up as well. For one thing, who is Atwood? You got to meet Atwood. We've got to wrap up Perseverance Mills, what's going on there, what was in the case. We also have Mathis, who's coming after Will. And also, what was his son's name? Was it Donna? I think his name was Donna. For some reason I'm thinking of Donager, but that's like a ship in the Expanse series. But yeah, you know who I mean. We haven't even seen that character. He was only talked about in episode 4, but of course, presumably he's going to show up as well. And presumably Methuselah will appear as well, because he's kind of like representation of nature, probably, of Wintermute. So there's quite a few characters involved that needs to be introduced or reintroduced and tied up. And also he has said that we're going to get explanations for the Aurora effects and quite a few other things. So there's just a lot to cover in one episode, so it's a very large one. He's also said there's multiple mechanics they're trying out, so there's new gameplay systems that are not in the game currently, and they want to make sure that that's working. So there's a lot for them to do. You know, they're not a very big studio, and they also have, therefore, a lot to do. I do know that the majority of the team is working on episode 5. He has said so in a previous dev diary that the vast majority of Hinterland is dedicated solely to doing episode 5. When Tales came out, they had a large portion of the team working on the Tales DLC for Survival, but now that that's finished, except for a few things, they are now transitioning to doing episode 5. So for the last year or so, practically all of Hinterland is doing episode 5, and there's a smaller team that's doing TLD 2 or Black Frost. Some people have criticized Hinterland for saying, well, why are you making a second game when you haven't finished the first one? Well, there's a complicated answer to that question, but the gist of it is that, well, they are about to wrap up the story mode. They probably know exactly where story mode is headed. They know exactly what to do. It's just a matter of making it. There's nothing to say that they can't make another game while wrapping up the story mode. And a lot of people seem to be concerned that they're going to get the Long Dark 2 before the Long Dark 1 finishes. But of course, that's not happening. The Long Dark 1 is scheduled to be wrapped up, as in the story mode is scheduled to be wrapped up the end of this year, so late 2025, and The Long Dark 2 comes out in early access, most likely, end of 2026, so they're like a year apart. And of course, what happens to The Long Dark 1 after that is a whole other story. We're not going to cover that now. I talked about that before, but there's still things to happen in The Long Dark 1. The Long Dark 2 does not supplant The Long Dark 1. It's just a different story, a different approach to it. So I wouldn't worry about that part. But anyway, it's a huge undertaking to make episode 5. There's so much to cover, so many things to go through, so many characters to do. And, you know, you got to do voice acting, terrain design, scripts, cinematics, new gameplay systems, and so on. In an old tweet a while back, Raf said that on average, it costs the studio about $300,000 to make one region for survival mode. Now, if episode 5 is as big as they say, and it sounds like it's about 3 or 4 times as big as Blackrock, I think you can safely assume it's like at least 3 regions you cover. A bit like episode 2 was 3 regions. It probably cost them like $1 million at least to do that. And they're a small studio. It's expensive to make. They did allude to the fact in a post, I can't remember exactly what post this was, but there was a post where they alluded that the areas added in episode 5 are not planned to be added to survival mode. That would be strange because all of the other areas that have been added or changed in story mode were added to survival mode. So it will be strange. But what I think happens is that it might be that a lot of episode 5 is more set pieces, because he's also said that there's at least twice as much cinematics in episode 5 as there is in episode 4. So it might be because episode 5 is more linear, so they can wrap up the narrative, it's possible that there's a lot of smaller regions to sort of finish the story and have the necessary terrain to do that. And they feel like that's not really a playable survival map in the same sense. That being said, I will be very surprised if they don't utilize those resources in survival mode. You know, what they could do, for example, is to take portions of one of the story maps, fuse it together with another portion of the story map, and make a new region of it that is some sort of combo. You know, it doesn't really matter if survival has a region that is partially similar to Wintermute. I mean, who cares, right? It doesn't have to be the same. So I think they probably will. Hinterland does listen to feedback from the community, and if the community said, we want to use these regions in some capacity or other in survival mode, I think Hinterland will do that. You know, they do listen to player feedback, which is good. Now, that's pretty much all there's to say about episode 5 as in of itself. It is coming out in 2025, unless we hear otherwise, which is probably within the next month, if not within the next few weeks. Episode 5 is coming out, and we can all play it. It might be that they decide to release it and they wish they had a little bit more time, and maybe there'll be bugs and it's not as polished as they would like, or something like that. You know, who knows? But unless we hear something else, we have no reason to think that episode 5 is going to be delayed, and it should be out very soon. But will it be delayed? Well, of course it could be delayed. I mean, I don't know, but it doesn't. There's nothing to indicate that it will be. The fact that they're silent about it doesn't mean that it's being delayed. It just means they're working on it. So I have faith that it is coming out soon. Whether I'm right or not, I mean, who knows? But it seems like, unless told otherwise, the episode should be out in December 2025 or something like that. And we can all play episode 5 and enjoy the end of Wintermute. Now, before we end this, one more thing I want to talk about episode 5. I have mentioned this before, but there's some context there regarding why it takes so long. So this is a bit of a complicated thing, and it also has to do with academic writing and this academic thinking. You see, there is a lot of pressure on Hinterland, and in particular Raf, the director who also writes the episodes. There's a lot of pressure on him for the episodes to be really good. The reason why that's the case is because of the dissonance between player narratives and authored narratives. So let me give you the gist of what that means. Basically, when Long Dark was in development, it was always aimed to be a story. Like, it was set in this post-apocalyptic, quiet winter landscape, but the story was what mattered. What happened was they released an early access version of Wintermute to the backers, so the Kickstarter backers. It wasn't public, only the backers could play it. And what happened was that they got feedback from people saying, we want more, we want to play the game more. But they didn't really want more of the story, because they didn't want the story to be introduced in sort of segments or pieces and then have it gradually spoiled. A lot of people were saying, basically, this is what Raf said, if I'm remembering correctly. Basically, they said that they were happy to wait for the story, or at least the episode of the story, to be wrapped up before they were given a chance to try that out. But they really liked playing the game. So then Hinterland decided that what they could do is they could just release a sandbox mode of what they were working on, remove the story from the game, and release it as just a mechanical thing that they can play, and then they can get feedback on the game mechanics and that sort of thing. And that's when they publicly released The Long Dark in early access, and you just had survival mode. And that exploded. It became immensely popular. People really liked survival mode, or sandbox mode as they called it at the time. And it just took over. And the longevity of The Long Dark is in survival mode. That's what people play. You know, when people say they play The Long Dark, what they say is they play survival mode. They may or may not have played the story too. They may or may not like the story. And there are a lot of people who love the story, are really invested in it, and can't wait for episode 5. But the backbone of The Long Dark, the longevity of it, is survival mode, because that's what took off. And when that happened, they realized that they had something else on their hand. They started developing survival mode first. And for a long time, survival mode and Wintermute story mode was hand in hand. If you changed one, you also had to change the other. So if you updated something in Wintermute, you had to update it in survival mode too, and vice versa. This was very laborious for Hinterland. Episode 3 is a good example, because in episode 3 came out, they changed Pleasant Valley a lot. They added the plane crash up in the hills, they added Thompson's Crossing, which wasn't there before, and this was also introduced in survival mode. So it's kind of like doing double the work. So when they added the Tales to survival mode, the Tales from the Far Territory DLC, they split the game into 2 and said from now on, Wintermute is not updated whenever we change something in survival mode, and vice versa. Which means they can freely work on episode 5 without worrying about how it impacts survival mode, and the other way around too. So that's one thing. But the other thing is that when they introduced survival mode, what that did is it created something that's called player narrative. Player narrative is when you as a person create your own story within the world you inhabit in the game. So you are a player here in Great Bear Island in the Long Dark, and there is just so much for you to do here, right? Sure, there's things that's kind of like invisible objectives, like, you know, crafting things, getting the bow, exploring. But the way you go about that is entirely your own story. You can choose to stay in one region, you can choose to explore everything, to hunt with the bow, to get a rifle, play Pilgrim, play Interloper, play with Aurora only. You can make a narrative, an actual story within the world yourself. There's so many ways you can approach the game, and what's happening then is that the developers are facilitating player stories in survival mode by adding things to the game that makes it feel like you're living your own adventure in the world. So you kind of go about the world as if it was your own, and there's no scripted events or anything like that. And Raf basically had this saying where we said that the adventure of the person playing in survival mode is entirely personal, and the events happening are not set up by the developers, and they are events that are unique to each player, but the developers want them to happen. They want people to have their own story, their own narrative. And people have that, you know, if you don't know the maps, you go in Blizzard, you get lost, you know, a cabin, I'm saved, oh my god, wow, I can't believe I survived that, amazing, right? And then that's your story, right? The developers didn't make that story for you, but they set it up with the world. And in my Discord, actually, I have a channel called Survivor's Diary, where people can go in and can tell their stories about what happened in the Long Dark. And people get up to all sorts of things. A lot of it's things like, oh, I almost died in a blizzard, or I fell through the ice, or I killed a bear with a flare gun, I didn't know that was possible, and my heart was racing, and so on. So see what I mean? Like, the game sets up all these little stories for each player, because we're invested in the world, we're the only player in this world. And it is our oyster, it is our winter landscape that we ourselves control within the means of the environment as far as it allows us. So that means that we are effectively writing our own story in survival mode as we play the game. Now, the consequence of that is that if you then are the writer of the Long Dark and you make a story that's authored, you have to make sure that that story actually is on par or better than what the player themselves can narrate, right? If they make a story and you think, nah, I don't really care for it, I think my own story in survival mode is more fun, then what's the point of having an authored story? See what I mean? So that's basically the gist of this, that because survival mode facilitates a player narrative-driven story, there's a lot of pressure on Raft to make an authored story that is very good and lives up to scratch for people who are used to having their own survival mode story. So I hope that made sense. It basically explains the pressure Hinterland is under to not just make a high quality product, but also wrap everything up that people have been waiting years for. And that's basically the context around the production of episode 5. And yeah, I hope that shedded some light on that. Okay, I guess that's more or less it to say about episode 5. I'm crossing my fingers, that it is coming out very soon. If you would like to share your own survival stories, feel free to join my Discord and tell us how you're getting on with your runs there. I'm happy to hear what's going on. Now, before we go, one technical thing, this is not important, but let me know if you've had any thoughts about the audio of this particular video. The reason I ask is that I recently changed my settings so that when I record my videos I have 2 different audio layers. One is for the in-game sound, one is for the microphone, while previously they were all glued into one. So that might mean that the audio is a little bit different in this video because it's recorded using different settings. And let me know what you think. Does it sound good? Does it sound bad? Sounds the same? Don't care? Let me know. If you watched all this way, then thank you for watching all this way, or listening all this way, I guess. And thank you for giving me feedback on the audio if you've watched this far. I look forward to playing episode 5. I have faith that it is going to be out soon, but you never know. It would have been fun to walk this all the way to Tails, by the way, the end of the line, which is kind of the idea, but I didn't think it would be a long enough video for that anyway. And as usual, thank you to my mods and my Patreons. If you'd like to support the channel, I consider becoming a Patreon. It makes a huge difference. And yeah, let's hope for episode 5. And here's to that. I'll see you in Wintermute. Bye bye, survivors.